All right, y'all. What is up? This is DFS Dart Throws in Cash. I apologize. First thing foremost, I missed a video earlier on in the week for that Thursday night slate. So a few things came up with work, and I was just a little too busy to kind of think about that slate in depth, and I didn't want to give y'all any bad information. I was also a little hesitant to play it because I honestly was kind of concerned about Tua and his health, and it turns out that he did get injured pretty early in the game, and it was a pretty bad injury. He had to be carted off. I'm sure all of y'all saw that. Pretty scary. I don't really understand why he was playing in the first place. I don't want to delve into that too much and beat a dead horse. We all know NFL players get injured; it's part of the game. But I can't really speculate on what that medical staff was thinking because it was pretty clearly a head injury to me last Sunday. And I think they're letting these players get back in the games a little too soon. I understand if you pass concussion protocol. Um, I've had concussions in the past, and it's pretty easy to pass those concussion tests. I mean, they ask you what year it is, who's the president. I mean, he passed concussion protocol within 8 minutes of sustaining that injury. And then they ruled it a back injury, and maybe Tua was misguiding them. We don't know all of the information, but it looked pretty clear to me that it was a head injury. And even if it was a nerve injury, you'd probably want to rest that on a 4 day uh, basis. I mean, if he's going to play again Thursday, it was a big game against the Bills. I get it, but it's your health, man. It's your life. You don't want to be crippled. You don't want to be dealing with CTE. Those effects last forever. It's not worth one game. Um, yeah, if it was a playoff Super Bowl, that's one thing, but it's just a regular season game. Pretty important game. I mean, prime time game. But yeah, that's enough of the Tua talk. It is what it is. Can't change anything. Hopefully he's healthy. Hopefully he'll get back and continue to be a beast. I think he's been having a really good season so far. I think the Dolphins could be great. Tyreek Hill's looking amazing. I mean, any quarterback is going to look amazing when they throw in a Tiger Kill, to be honest. But yeah, let's go on. Let's move on to this week 4 lineup or these week 4 lineups. And I will kind of talk about who I like, who I don't like, why I like them. And yeah, let's just go ahead and get into it. So if you've watched my videos previously, we always talk about the over-unders. Those are Vegas totals. So first off, the Bills Ravens, they have the highest Vegas total on the week. I think this game should be a pretty great game. I think that the Bills have a great defense, but the Ravens have an awesome offense. So we'll see how this plays out. A couple notes that I have just to talk about before I speak about the players. So the Bills have the number 4 ranked run defense. So I'm going to fade pretty much all the Ravens running backs this week. J.K. Dobbins, his health is kind of up in the air. Um, Gus Edwards still isn't back. And then you've got a couple other guys that are just not really viable to play. They haven't really scored any points at all this fantasy season. So just going to fade them completely. So that leaves a lot up to the passing game for the Ravens. So I think that that could be potentially like a huge advantage if you have some Ravens players on your team because that's pretty much their only option. Comes down to just the pass game. It's kind of similar to that other game we watched. Yeah, last week. I mean, the only way you can attack the Bills is through the air, essentially. So and then, yeah, so the Bills have 4 players ruled out and 7 questionable as of today. I mean, that was the last news report I have. A few defensive players. One of the questionable players that's notable was Gabe Davis. So we will see how that turns out. Gabe Davis is okay. His pricing, I'm hesitant always to play, excuse me, injured players coming back from some time off. It's just it's not somebody I really like to target. I mean, in GPPs, it could be a good strategy because they're going to be lower owned. A lot of people have that same mindset. They don't want to grab somebody that has that Q next to their name on DraftKings. It just looks bad. But sometimes the questionable stuff, it's just them wanting to sit out and just kind of focus on their health a little bit. And maybe it's not as serious, but we don't really get all that information. But that big red Q is kind of scary next to his name. So Gabe Davis, I'm not going to play much of. You can play him in some tournaments if you want. At 6,600, he could do great. So it is what it is. The Ravens have one of the worst secondaries in the league. And that other stat down there, Ravens give up the most fantasy points to the quarterback in the league. So that means that they're going to be passing a lot. They're going to be a lot of blown coverages. So I think that Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs stack is just going to be what you need to be hitting on in cash games. I would even maybe double stack Diggs with McKenzie. So just do like an Allen, Stephon Diggs, and McKenzie stack, or you could even do like a Gabe Davis if you wanted, but I wouldn't really want to do that in cash games. But Josh Allen has exceeded expectations every single game. He's averaging around 30 plus fantasy points on DraftKings. And he got around 30 fantasy points on DraftKings last week, and he didn't even really throw for that many touchdowns. I believe it was either one or two, but he threw like something like, I don't know. It was a ridiculous number of attempts. But yeah, Josh Allen, he's still too cheap. Cash lineups, you got to go Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts, or you're probably not going to cash. So if I were to advise anybody, Josh Allen would be the safest pick on the week this week. It just sucks because $8,400, it is a decent price tag, and it's hard to kind of fit lower price guys, especially at the running back position this season. So they're pricing the RB2s at a higher price tag than they have previously, just because in previous years there would be an injury to the RB1, and they made the lineup before that injury happened, and then you could get these like RB2s that are now RB1s for like $4,000 and just really exploit it, and they would be like 90% owned. So I think they're just trying to make it a little bit more difficult to get those cheaper running backs. So yeah, I think there's a few running backs that I'm pretty high on this week. Devin Singletary could be one of them. I think it really just depends on the coach and the usage of Devin Singletary. His last game, he destroyed it. I think he had around 20 fantasy points. He was killing it. They were using him in the passing game a lot. They were running with him. So I think he's a pretty good option this week. Probably one of the safer options. I would probably have him in cash games as well. I wouldn't really want to stack Allen, Diggs, Singletary all together and McKenzie. I mean, that's just too many bills. Maybe in a cash game that might work, but I don't think in GPPs that's really what you would want, because you would either want to stack a QB and a running back, or like a QB and a wide receiver, or yeah, something along those lines. You could have these mega stacks, but I'm not super fond of them, especially if there's a running back involved in the mix. So Josh Allen going to be my number one QB this week for sure. It's just going to be a little bit hard to fit in some decent wide receivers and running backs as well. So, but I'll give you guys some good options here. So yeah, moving on to the Ravens, got Lamar Jackson at 8,300. He's been killing it this season. He was in the Millie Maker lineup last week. I think he got like 40 plus points. Mark Andrews in the Millie Maker lineup as well. He got around 30 points. So I think I was touching on like before, if a tight end is the best tight end, it gives you such a huge advantage in your lineup, because say you grab a kind of cheaper like $3,000, $4,000 tight end, right, and they score like 10, 12 points, that'll be good for you, right? Because you can spend that money up elsewhere. But if you spend that extra like $2,000, $3,000, and then you get a tight end that scores, let's say, 30 fantasy points, then and you get a cheaper wide receiver for like 4,000, 5,000, and they end up doing just as good as somebody else, then you are putting yourself in like a 15 to 20 point advantage. So if you have the best tight end on the week, it definitely helps your lineups a lot in those tournaments. It makes a huge difference. So I would think Mark Andrews is a good play again this week. So I honestly would just stack the crap out of this game, since it is the highest total. I think that there will be a lot of scoring. Rashad Bateman, another great option. He's the wide receiver one over there. He hasn't really had a huge breakout upside game. I mean, Lamar Jackson's the type of guy to run a lot, so his passing volume's not there completely. So Rashad Bateman can have these 4 or 5 catch games for 100 yards and a TD, but that really only puts you at 20 fantasy points, right? Which is still a lot, but it's not very sustainable to have the one play for 60 yards or 70 yards that gives you that touchdown. So he's a good GPP play, I believe. I think that stacking this game, like I said, is going to be a really good idea. He could have 20, 30 fantasy points. This game could end up I don't know, 42 to 35 or something crazy. We haven't had a game like that in a long time, where it's that high scoring. It seems like this season, all the games have been super low scoring, even with the implied point totals being relative, they're high and then they end up being way lower for some reason. I don't really understand what's going on with NFL this year, but it's a little odd. Duvernay, one of the cheaper options. He's another kind of GPP type play. He's the same with Rashad Bateman. Like I said, not much volume. He gets 3 to 4 catches a week, and maybe actually even less. Sometimes he'll have 2 catches, one for 50 yards and a TD, and another for 15 yards, and it'll end up getting value. But like I said, it's not super sustainable. But against the Bills, I think they're going to be throwing the ball a lot. Lamar's going to be running the ball a lot. It's just going to be offense, offense, offense. And if I'm wrong, then honestly, I mean, that could happen. It could just be highly defensive or something. But I think this game has the most breakout potential. Yeah, so definitely play this game. Get some huge stacks. Honestly, I might even put a tournament entry with just all these guys, and then kind of plug in my dart throws along the way, so I can make something happen here. So, but yeah, this game, target it for sure. We spent 10 minutes on this game already. So, okay, moving on. We got Browns Falcons. It's kind of funny. This is the second highest point total on the week, or I guess for the main slate. So one second, I'm gonna take a drink. All right, so Browns are implied 24 points versus the Falcons 23. So, I mean, I don't really see how this is the second highest point total. I could see, I mean, this is a decent line, because the Falcons D isn't very good. The Falcons offense is pretty good, and then the Browns D is good, and the offense is bad. So, yeah, it could be either way. I mean, this is a decent line. I feel like this is probably gonna how it's gonna end up. But that leaves room for maybe 3 touchdowns for both sides, or 2 touchdowns and 2 field goals. That's probably what it'll end up being like. So, Browns players to target. They have the higher point total. So, Nick Chubb, he gets around 20 attempts a game. Last game he killed it. I think he's the RB1 so far this season. So he's a good play, just a little expensive. I would probably put him more in my cash games. You could put him in tournament lineups, but he is pretty expensive. So it's hard to fit somebody like Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson along with Nick Chubb. But I think if you get Nick Chubb and Josh Allen and then one cheaper running back and then a couple cheaper wide receivers, I think you're good to go. Amari Cooper, I think he's going to be a great play this week. I mean, he's had 6 targets week 1, 10 targets week 2, 11 targets week 3. And Falcons are 29th against wide receiver in fantasy points. He had a breakout game last week and the week before, both over 20 points. I don't think the Falcons D will be able to keep up with him, and he's pretty fairly priced. I would put him in either cash or tournament lineups. I mean, he's just good to go across the board. He's one of my favorite options, probably my top 3 favorite options on this week. Okay, and Njoku. So he had a really great week last week. I mean, he killed it. Just was one of the best tight ends on the week. I think he's a decent play. I would probably play him in more tournament lineups than cash games, just because he doesn't have that type of volume every week. So his floor is a little bit lower. Ceiling's super high though. I think in a tournament he could be like the tight end 2, tight end 3 on the week for sure if he gets that same volume. If Brissett keeps throwing the ball, but it's hard to foresee all three of these guys going off because if you look at the point total, it's 24, right? So max, if this the game script is like what it's gonna be, then they get what, one touchdown each, or Nick Chubb gets 2 touchdowns, Amari Cooper gets 1, and then Njoku doesn't get any. So you just gotta think about it. Like not all three of these guys could necessarily go off. I mean, they could. The receivers could get a lot of points based on their receptions because this is a PPR format. So I think that Amari Cooper and Njoku are both good plays just based on that, and their floors are relatively low based on the volume there. But Njoku, more of a tournament play. Amari Cooper, either cash or tournament. I think he's going to be one of the better wide receivers on the week, especially at that value. Nick Chubb probably will be top 5 RB for sure. Falcons players to target. So Marcus Mariota, again, super cheap. I would consider him in cash games. I mean, you're not going to win a tournament with Marcus Mariota. He's his upside's not there, but he is consistently getting around 18 fantasy points every game, and that is our value. So at 5,600, I mean, he's going to be a good option. Sorry, I've got a dog rolling around and making noise in the back. So I don't know if you guys can hear that, but it's a little distracting for me. Anyway, we got Drake London, $6,100. He has had 7, 12, and 6 targets the last 3 weeks, and he's averaging around 20 fantasy points. He's great. If you guys play fantasy and drafted him in a later round, I think he was probably going 7th round, 8th round. You're in good shape. He's an excellent wide receiver. I think he's got a ton of potential. So playing him again this week is a good idea. His floor is pretty low, ceiling's pretty high. So the only problem is Brown's D is okay. So we'll see how it goes, but I think he's a good cash play. I think his floor is pretty low. And then Cordell Patterson may be out this game. He probably isn't. But I don't really see a good play on Cordell Patterson this week, primarily because they've been running with him a lot. He's had a lot of rushing attempts, but he hasn't had very many receptions. So last year they were kind of using him as this wide receiver hybrid running back, and he was getting a lot of targets. But this year he's not getting targets. He's running, but he's had a lot of success running the ball. But I think the Browns' run D is pretty good. I don't want to play Cordell Patterson this week necessarily unless you have to. And if Patterson is out, definitely play Algier. He would be the RB1 in just that amount of volume with the work that he'd be getting. I think that would be a really good play. And I don't think he's bad at all. I think he's a pretty good running back. I honestly think that they should probably even out the workload between Patterson and Algier. But for a fantasy perspective, I hate running backs by committee, and I'm sure everybody else does too if you're playing fantasy. So I don't know. Cordell Patterson's a good choice. Not against the Browns though. Anyway, moving on. Lions Seahawks over unders 48, implied team totals 25 to 23. So this game should be very interesting. I always for some reason I like the Lions a lot this year. Amon-Ra St. Brown's out, which is going to be a big deal, I think. I think he's really the only standout wide receiver that the Lions have. So, honestly, I don't see the Lions winning this game. But in a perspective where they do win the game, which is what Vegas is predicting, and they're better at predicting games than I am, I think Jamal Williams will go off yet again. He had roughly 25 fantasy points last week. I think he had 2 touchdowns, a bunch of opportunities, with no DeAndre Swift, and against Seattle's 27th run ranked defense. You have to play him. He's going to be chalky. Everybody's going to be on him, but you have to play him because if you don't, then you are missing out. You're just gonna have to get different at other positions. So I think Jamal Williams should be in pretty much every single one of your lineups. I'm gonna probably have 80% exposure in my lineups for Jamal Williams. Yeah. So DJ Chark currently questionable. So with St. Brown out, you should definitely consider him. He's had a few pretty egregious drops, and he had a good breakout game, but it's hard to tell if it's going to be him or Josh Reynolds, you know. But with Amon-Ra St. Brown out, it's either or. So I think both of these guys are good GPP plays. Chark had a huge dud. He had like a 0 for me like two weeks ago, and that was really like kind of crappy. So I'm kind of off Chark a little bit. And I think I'm more Josh Reynolds. I mean, he got 10 targets that last game. A little note I put there. He would be a good GPP play. I think Goff is starting to like him a little bit more than Chark. And Chark's just getting old, I think. This is kind of like one of my favorite tight end plays, if not the favorite tight end play on the week. It's TJ Hawkinson. So the last 3 weeks, he had 7, 7, and 4 targets. He's got high upside for the GPP plays, and he's pretty low floor cash. I think with Amon-Ra St. Brown out, I think Goff is going to be looking Hawkinson's way a lot more. Hawkinson had some pretty good plays last week. I think Hawkinson will find the end zone this week, and that'll basically put him above and beyond where he's expected to finish. I think that he'll at least have 15, 16 fantasy points, if not 20. So I think he's a great play. I will have him in my cash games, and I will have him in my tournaments. So I think he's just too cheap. I mean, all the tight ends are really cheap this week. I would even be privy to put a tight end in my flex this week just because they're so cheap. And they are getting a lot of usage. Like if you had Hawkinson and Njoku, one would be in your flex. I think that could be a potential really great play, especially in cash, just because both of them like have like relatively low floors and they've been getting the targets recently. Seahawks to target. We got 4,900 for Rashad Penny. He was a beast last year. I mean, he was just killing it. If you had him on your fantasy team towards the end of last year, you were going to the playoffs if you played him. He was getting a ridiculous amount of work. He was performing very well. This season, they haven't really got him going. I'm not sure why, but the Lions are 31st against running backs, and he's the clear RB1. He's getting more attempts than Kenneth Walker, and I think that he's just too cheap to ignore. He will be good in either cash or tournaments. I would prefer to put him in tournaments just because you just never know, because he hasn't had a really big breakout game yet. So that low floor is kind of keeping me off of him in cash games. Yeah, so Rashad Penny, I think he's a sneaky play this week. DK Metcalf, GPP option for sure. He's great. I think he's like really great. He's one of the most talented, most physically gifted wide receivers in the NFL. I don't really understand what is holding him back completely other than Geno Smith. I really don't think Geno Smith is that bad of a quarterback either. But yeah, he's a GPP option. He could have a breakout game. I mean, I'm just waiting. DK Metcalf is just so physically gifted that at any point in time he could really break out. I'm not putting him in any of my cash lineups, that's for sure, though. I really won't. Just because that price tag, I mean, Amari Cooper's less than him. There's a couple other options that I'll go over later that are cheaper and probably better, more efficient. I would even play Drake London over him, and he's $700 cheaper. So, yeah. I would play Lockett over him, which is the next person I'm about to talk about. So Lockett's 5,900. That's kind of expensive, but he's been like sneakily doing extremely well. The last couple games, he's been around 20 fantasy points. I don't have the exact stats right in front of me. But he did have 11 targets in the last 2 games, which is insane. That's a ton. I mean, just think, like, even if he catches 9 of 11 targets, that's 9 points. So anything above that, like say he got 60 yards on those 9 catches, then he's at 15 fantasy points, essentially paid for himself, just with that type of volume, and especially against the Lions, who probably won't get their offense going very well in this game without Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think that Lockett's a good option. And yeah, I think he's got high upside and he's good value there for sure. Let's move on. All right. Eagles Jaguars. This game's gonna be bleh. I mean, it could go either way, but Eagles have been performing like crazy every week so far. Jaguars defense has been sneakily good. They yeah, I mean they shut what was it, the Colts down last week. They've been shutting down some pretty good teams on defense, but I don't think that's really sustainable. I'm not sure that their defense is really that good overall. Um, yeah. So anyway, let's talk about the Eagles. We got an implied team total of 25.5. The spread is 6.5. This is like a rough estimate. Um, so yeah, Jaguars aren't predicted to score very much. I mean, what is that, like 2 touchdowns and maybe like 2 field goals if you round up. Um, yeah. So Eagles projected to score maybe 3 touchdowns and a field goal. Rough numbers. So those 3 touchdowns got to come somewhere. Jalen Hurts is going to be involved for sure. Miles Sanders hasn't. He found like the end zone week 1, and then yeah, I think Boston Scott's out. So I think Hurts is going to put the team on his back like he normally does. His lowest fantasy week is 24.72 fantasy points. I mean, it's either him or Allen and Cash or Lamar Jackson. That's what it's got to be. I feel like if you don't have one of those 3 guys in your lineups, then there's no other quarterbacks that are really scoring that many points. I mean, if you look at it across the board, those kind of like mid-tier $6,000, $7,000 quarterbacks are. I mean, they're really only pushing maybe like 25 points. I feel like Carson Wentz was like the only one who really had great value and put up like 25 points when he was like $6,000 or something like that. But then you got like Lamar Jackson last week, 43 fantasy points. I mean, and he was what, $8,000. So even that $2,000 difference for like 20 more points is, I mean, you've got to pay up. I mean, in my opinion, you just have to do it. Because you can always find a cheaper wide receiver that will outperform a more expensive wide receiver. So I think paying up at quarterback is pretty pivotal. So yeah. Moving on, AJ Brown's at 7,400, still really cheap, relatively. I mean, I would put AJ Brown if I was like a DraftKings. I don't know, if I was giving people their values, I would probably put AJ Brown at like 8,000 at least. I mean, he's got 13 targets week 1, 8 targets week 2, 10 targets week 3, and he's averaging 20 fantasy points. So I mean, he's roughly like priced pretty decently, but his upside is higher. I mean, you've got people who are averaging like 15 fantasy points that have had one good game, and they're at like 8,000 plus. So I think AJ Brown's a little bit cheap. He's like too cheap for me. And then you got Devontae Smith. He's an interesting person, like player to think about. He's coming off a 33-point game. Nobody really saw it coming. I mean, I think a lot of people even dropped him off their fantasy teams earlier on in the year because he was kind of like a dud. He wasn't getting really any targets, wasn't really catching the ball. I don't know what was going on there, but if AJ Brown gets locked down, Devontae Smith will probably be open, and he could have a potentially really big game again too. Devontae Smith was in the Millie Maker lineup last week, so if you're playing tournaments, I would definitely consider him, at least putting him in some of your lineups there. And you got Jaguars to target. I'm not big on the Jaguars whatsoever. These 2 guys are just options in GPP. I would not really put either one of these guys in my cash lineups. I mean, there's reasons to play Christian Kirk. So he outperformed value every week so far. I mean, he's got 3 times value. So if he was $5,000, he was getting 20 points. If he was $6,000, he was getting 19 points. Like, I mean, that's less, but you understand what I'm saying. It's 3 times the value. So if you just think of, I don't know if I ever clearly explained this, but if you got 60 or 6,600, you would think of that as 6.6, and then you would multiply that by 3, and that would be 19.8, right? I think I'm right. Um, no, six, whatever. Roughly 19, 20 points, something like that. Um, yeah, so you would multiply that by three because that's kind of like the standard of what you need to hit in order to cash every week. So your lineup needs to be around 150 fantasy points total. Maybe like some weeks if people perform poorly, like the chalk performs poorly, you could maybe make it around 130. Like last weekend, um, that was a weird week. So like I actually cashed it with a lineup in the Millie Maker with like 128 points, but the standard is basically 150 points. It's kind of where you want to be at. Um, so or like once like 165. So because if you think about the total salary that you have, it's 55,000, and if you multiply that by three, that's 165. So you want 165,000. So you want to divide that by 1,000 to make it like into the fantasy points that you want. So yeah, 165 you will cash regardless, pretty much in any lineup, unless some crazy shit goes on and all the chalk just like completely outperforms. Yeah, that's pretty much the only time that 165 point lineup won't cash. That's a pretty huge tangent, and I probably explained that kind of weird, but it is what it is. I'm weird. I just wanted to clarify that a little bit. So yeah, Christian Kirk outperformed value, but Darius Slay. That's all I gotta say. Darius Slay's a freaking beast, man. He was shutting down like everybody. He shut down Amon Ra. He shut down like pretty much everybody he's gone against. I can't remember the exact matchups, but I know he's gone up against some elite wide receivers and he has shut them down completely. James Robinson. Oh, it was Justin Jefferson last week. That's who it was because I had him on my fantasy team and he was just Justin Jefferson did jack crap against yeah, Darius Slay, unfortunately. Anyway, you got James Robinson, 6,400. This is an okay play. I'm not super high on James Robinson. I never really was, just because Travis Etienne's there, and James Robinson was coming off that injury, and I think what he tore his Achilles or something like crazy, and I had never really seen a player perform well off of the Achilles injury. Um, yeah, Cam Akers came back and he was trash. So I was like, oh, well, I guess James Robinson will be trash too. So I haven't really been that high on him to begin with. But he's hit value every week. I mean, he's been pretty low priced. Um, yeah, I mean, he's going up against the Eagles that are 24th against running backs. But I think with that point implied team total of 19 with the Jaguars, I just don't really see him returning value at that $6,400 price tag. That's the most expensive that he's been so far. Yeah, moving on. We got some honorable mentions. We got Derrick Henry here. So he is very overpriced. I think he's a GPP play. Would not really play him in cash. But my most notable stat about him, he had 25.3 fantasy points last game and 6 targets. So Derrick Henry's a freak. He once he gets going, he gets going. He's got that potential to score like 30, 40 fantasy points just running the ball, right? Like last year, he had that like 3 or 4 game span where he was just running the ball and he was like rushing for 200 yards and like 2 touchdowns, just crazy, insane stats. And then last week, he got 6 targets on top of that. I mean, the first 2 games, he didn't really get that many targets, but if they are going to be passing him the ball and he's got that potential, it's going to be game over if he actually gets going in one of these games. So I think he's definitely one to keep in the back of your mind and be like, he could really be great. I mean, he could be a difference maker in your lineup. All right, so $8,000 for Saquon Barkley. So they are missing 3 wide receivers. Wan'Dale Robinson's out, Sterling Shepard's out, and Kadarius Toney is out. So where are they going to go? I mean, there's Richie James Jr. and then David Sills, and then Kenny Galladay, who hasn't done anything like whatsoever. So I think Saquon Barkley is going to be running the ball, catching the ball. I think he's going to be really, really widely used. I think he's going to be a great cash play. Could be a good tournament play, but it's going to be hard to fit in these guys like Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb. They're just too high priced to really take advantage of them. But I think that it could be the difference if you find dart throws at wide receiver that can score you 20, 30 points. Like if you found Hollins last week where he got 30 points and then you got Saquon Barkley to make up for that. And then you can kind of fit in like the more expensive players. I think that's the way to go if you're trying to win the tournament. But it's going to be hard to hit on those cheaper owned guys. So good luck to everybody. I hope my dart throws are the ones that could win you that $1 million. But yeah, let's move on. Austin Eckler. So he's still super high price, and he really hasn't performed that well. I think he's averaging 15 fantasy points. Um, so my notes here: Justin Herbert is still slightly injured. I mean, he bruised his ribs or something like that. It was I don't know. He was in a lot of pain. Could hardly throw the ball. It was weird. It was like a really weird game because he hurt his ribs, and then it seemed like he couldn't even walk or like there was like a play where like it was like it was like 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2 or something, and he's running and he's literally like about to like run to the first down, and then he throws the ball down the field, or he just throws the ball away actually, and it was like, why didn't he just like run the 1 or 2 yards? Like he was so hurt he wasn't even like thinking right. So but then like a few plays after, he goes and throws like a 40-yard pass to I think it was like Joshua Palmer or somebody, and it was like, what the heck? Like, what, is he faking? I just don't understand. I don't think he's faking, but it was just weird. Like, anyway, Texans are 32nd against the running back position, so I think Eckler is a very viable play. He could have a really great game. Don't keep Austin Eckler out of your lineups this week. Yeah, moving on. Khalil Herbert, he is probably my favorite running back other than Jamal Williams. I'm going to have a lot of Jamal Williams, a lot of Khalil Herbert, just because I'm going to be paying up at that quarterback position. So I can't have Saquon and Chubb and Allen unless I want to completely punt the wide receiver position. And the wide receiver position is where you're going to get your most points normally, because in PPR leagues, the receptions add up. I mean, if you've got like 10 receptions per player, per wide receiver or something, and if one's in your flex position, I mean, this is just an example, but if they each have 10 receptions, it's 10 fantasy points automatically, versus like where you have a running back, and if he's not really a big pass catcher, I mean, 80 rushing yards is the same as 8 receptions. And then when you have like 70 yards on those receptions, you've got 7 more points than a running back who rushed 80 yards, which is actually probably harder, in my opinion, to rush 80 yards than it is to catch passes for 70 yards. Yeah, so Khalil Herbert, I think he's a good play for sure. So yeah, I think he's going to be pretty cheap. He had a career game last week, essentially. I don't know if it's like his best game ever, but it seemed like it could have been. I didn't really go back and look at all the stats, but if I know last year when David Montgomery was out, he was absolutely killing it. He will I think he'll continue to kill it. He's way too low priced. I mean, you're getting an RB1 at RB2 value. Plug Herbert, plug Jamal Williams in, just do it. Giants are 22nd against running backs as well. Just a little bit more justification to play him. You got Javonte Williams for 6,600, and he has a huge PPR advantage as well. He catches a lot of passes out of the backfield. Then the Raiders are 30th against the running back, so I think he could have a very good game. I'll probably play him more in tournaments. Yeah, but he's an option. He's not one of my favorite options, but I think just don't neglect him. I think that the Broncos are due for some points, to score some like actual points. There were a lot of times where Melvin Gordon was given the ball on the 1 yard line and he did not score, or they fumbled the ball. I think Javonte Williams, once he starts finding the end zone, will be great. 6,600. If he does find the end zone this week, That'll be a great price tag for him. All right, and then we got Brees Hall. So Brees Hall is like a weird pick right now. I think if he's going to have the same usage that he did with Flacco with Zach Wilson back, I think that he will be an even better pick than he was before. Um, yeah, Zach Wilson likes to do some dump passes. Brees Hall got 11 targets last game. That's more than most wide receivers. So at 5,400, how are you going to fade him with 11 targets last game? He's more of a tournament play, in my opinion, just because 11 targets is not sustainable completely, but he does have a lot of other targets in his two prior games. Um, Steelers are 25th against the run. I think Brees Hall is a great pick. Even Michael Carter would be a really good pick against them as well. But I don't want to play both those guys. And honestly, I think the Jets are going to just demolish the Steelers. I don't know why, but I think Zach Wilson's going to come back and be an absolute animal. um, I'm going to have some stacks with Zach Wilson, and I'll tell you about it here in a second when we go over the wide receivers. On to Damien Harris. Mac Jones is out. Patriots may rely on the rushing game. So Damien Harris is pretty much obviously like the RB1 there. Ramondre Stevenson is stealing a little bit of the carries. It seems like Damien Harris is a little banged up sometimes, so they always put Ramondre Stevenson in. The unfortunate thing is it seems like Damien Harris does the brunt like work in the beginning of the drives, but when it gets to like the red zone, they tend to put Ramondre Stevenson in a little bit more because like Damien Harris starts to tire out. Um, but if Damien Harris like starts to get some goal line carries, he will be pretty amazing. 5,300. Don't sleep on him. All right, moving on. Honorable mentions again for the wide receivers. So Michael Pittman is up there for me. I'm going by descending order of price. So Michael Pittman is the number one wide receiver on the Colts. He's gotten 13 and 9 targets in the previous 2 games. He was a little banged up in one game, so he didn't get any play time, obviously. And the Titans are 28th against wide receiver. I think that Michael Pittman is the Colts offense. Doolin's not doing it for him. Paris Campbell, did he get injured? I can't remember. But it seems if Michael Pittman isn't playing, the Colts are not in the game. All right. So next up, Mike Williams. Keenan Allen is out again. He's a hit or miss GPP play. So Mike Williams is either a 30-point guy or a 5-point guy. I mean, that's just how he is, man. Like, I think he's great for a GPP play this week. Yeah, I think he could have a really great game. But and Justin Herbert is still banged up, so that's kind of like keeping me off of him a little bit. But I think you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you completely faded him. Maybe have him in like 1 or 2 lineups for you. And then, okay, we got CeeDee Lamb, 6,700. So Cooper Rush has been okay. He's been throwing the ball mostly to CeeDee Lamb. I think that he's a decent quarterback. He's getting the job done. He's had some wins. I mean, I think he's still undefeated for the Cowboys, which is kind of funny to think about. Cowboys D is so good. So I think the Cowboys are going to have the ball frequently. CeeDee Lamb, 11, 11, and 12 targets in the previous 3 weeks. So he's got that PPR upside. Catches the ball 8 times, already got 8 points there. Commanders are 30th against the wide receiver. So this is a rivalry game. I think that CeeDee Lamb will kill it. I think he'll have a decent game. I would probably put him more on... you could either do cash or tournaments, to be honest. I don't really see CeeDee Lamb having like a 30-plus point fantasy game, but hey, he could. Last week, so yeah, on that, what was it, the Monday night 2-game slate? Was that what it was? He dropped like a 40, 50-yard pass, and if he caught that, he would have probably ended up with around 30 points. So yeah, CeeDee Lamb, sorry, I'm kind of ambivalent. I'm going back and forth, but I'm like debating with myself. But yeah, CeeDee Lamb, don't fade him. He could be good. Cortland Sutton, 6,400. He's had 7, 11, and 10 targets in the first 3 weeks. He's killing it so far. He seems to be really great. Russell Wilson needs to get his stuff together. He's not throwing the ball very well. He's kind of making poor decisions with the ball. He just doesn't look like the Russell Wilson of the past. He just really doesn't. So I think Cortland Sutton, if Russell Wilson gets his stuff together, then I think Cortland Sutton could be a great wide receiver, could be top 5 wide receiver on the week. All right, Brandon Cooks, we're going down this road again. We got Brandon Cooks for 5,800. His targets are still there, 12, 10, and 7. So, I mean, he's due for a breakout. He's not a player that gets less than 10 points. Like, it just doesn't really happen for him. I think he's going to kill it. I think this week he's going to bounce back and he's going to do pretty well. And I think, like, from here on out, I think he's going to be a pretty decent wide receiver, too. All right, so, and then at 5,400, we got Garrett Wilson. And then I'm kind of like putting him in here with Elijah Moore because he's 4,800. And these guys are just getting targets. Like Flacco was throwing the ball a ton, but I think he was throwing it badly. Flacco, one thing, I listen to fantasy footballers a lot, and they said Flacco's not very mobile in the pocket. So that kind of makes his passing not as good because he can't extend plays, which I totally agree with. And that's good analysis. So I think when Zach Wilson's out there, he's a little bit more mobile of a quarterback. I think he's going to extend the play. He's going to allow Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore to get open more. And I think Zach Wilson is he favors Elijah Moore. So I think Elijah Moore could be a sneaky play this week. I mean, yeah, I'm big on Elijah Moore this week and Garrett Wilson as well. I think a Zach Wilson, Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore stack. I think it's going to be great, to be honest. I've got a Millie Maker stack with those 3, so I can like buy up at running back and then pay a little bit more for defense because there's not really that many great defenses this week. I didn't put a PowerPoint slide for defenses on this presentation, but I will say a couple defenses that I like real quick at the end. So, yeah, we got Joshua Palmer to end our wide receivers. He has 8 and 9 targets the last 2 games. Keenan Allen is out yet again, so I think his usage, like in game 1, he had less targets, and then when he was out, he's had more targets. So he's got the volume, he's got the potential. I think he could be a really good upside play. Even in cash games, you could play him. Like, that's a nice even $5,000. I think that's a really great price. Sorry, my nose is itchy. I don't know what the hell's going on. All right. Honorable mentions for tight ends. So we've already talked about some tight ends already. We got Njoku and then Hawkinson. So those are like my 2 favorites. And Mark Andrews. So Mark Andrews is, I'll probably have some shares of him, but it's hard for me to go on the chalk from last week. It's just how often does a Millie Maker lineup look like the one from the week before? Like, do you think this Millie Maker lineup will have Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews in it again? It could be, but it's like, what's the probability of that? But it shouldn't keep me off of them, but it kind of does. So that's up to you guys to make that decision. But I'll probably have Andrews like a little bit less, just considering if you want to like pay up for Jamal Williams or Khalil Herbert. Not like that's even really paying up that much, but if you want to fit Allen or Jackson or Hurts with those 2 running backs, that's still kind of a lot because I want to pay up a little bit at wide receiver so I can at least get like Amari Cooper's at 6,000 something, and then Deontay Johnson. Wait, did I even have Deontay Johnson on here? Oh crap! Yep, I'm glad I remembered. So Deontay Johnson, he's like $6,000, give or well, he's around 6,000. I know it's not below 6,000, but definitely consider him. He's got a lot of targets. I think the PPR format will benefit him a lot too. So definitely don't sleep on Deontay Johnson this week. I think it's going to be a pretty good game against the Jets. I think that there could be some blown coverages. I think that Deontay Johnson will get usage. So yeah, forgot to add him in here, but I was definitely wanting to. So anyway, Conklin, 7, 9, 8 targets. May change with Zach Wilson in, but he's like top 10 or top 5 tight ends even. Like, I mean, he's averaging like 12, 13 points a game, roughly. So I mean, play Tyler Conklin. Yeah, in cash, I would play Tyler Conklin. Like if you need a cheap flex, Tyler Conklin, do it. But yeah, like I said, it may change with Zach Wilson in, but maybe not. Yeah. So and then we got Robert Tanyan. I think he's a decent play against the 29th ranked Patriots against the tight end. I think that he's gonna kill it. Had 6 or 7 targets last game, and I think that Aaron Rodgers is looking at him and his reads a lot more. So yeah, I think Tanyan's going to be good, especially since the Patriots are not that great against tight end. All right, dart throws. There's not too many this week. Unfortunately, I can't really find anybody that cheap, but I've got 4 options here for you. So you got Romeo Dobbs. Aaron Rodgers is kind of building a little bit of a rapport with him. Sammy Watkins is out, and he got 8 targets last game. So I could potentially see him getting some targets this game again, getting some decent catches. I think the more he plays, the better he gets. So he's definitely a good option, pretty cheap. I wouldn't leave him out of your lineups, to be honest. And then we got Matt Collins. So last week he killed it. He was a wide receiver 2 on the week last week. He had like 30 fantasy points. And Renfro was out, and I think that's the main reason why he's getting that much usage. He kind of plays that Renfro role. So Collins definitely another great play at 4,200. I think he was priced with Renfro in, so he's priced down because Renfro is out. Well, he was priced down because they thought Renfro was in, but he's still at that same price, you know. So like if they knew Renfro was going to be out, he'd probably be in the 5,000. So I think he's mispriced here. And then we got the Giants wide receivers. I know they're not sexy, but I mean, like I said earlier, 3 of them are out. Like yeah, Wan'Dale Robinson out. You got Sterling Shepard out, and you got Kadarius Toney out. Richie James will be the wide receiver 1. I mean, unless Kenny Golladay somehow steps up and plays the best game that he's played in like 10 games or whatever. So I think Richie James is like too cheap. I would definitely consider him, and he's probably going to be like one of my main dart throws this week. And then David Sills, he'll be in a couple of my tournament lineups. So because he's either the wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 on the Giants. Depends on how many times they target Kenny Golladay. But yeah, I think Sills is a great option as well, and he's the cheapest a wide receiver can be. So I think that's pretty much it. Yes, it is. I'm going to change that back just so it's not a big dark screen and then it looks weird. But yeah, so my number 1 defense on the week is the Cowboys. Wentz got sacked a ton last week. I think the Cowboys have one of the best defenses in the NFL right now. I'm going for the Cowboys. If you want a cheaper D, I would probably go for the Texans, or I would even think about maybe grabbing the Cardinals because the Panthers have not scored very many points at all. I mean, last week we won, I think, because we scored like a defensive touchdown, and yeah, we were going up against the Saints. It was a meh game, but yeah, Cardinals I think would be a decent play. Texans decent play. Packers, they're the most expensive defense, but they're viable. Maybe grab them in cash or something. But I like to punt defenses normally, so but there's not that many defenses to punt. So Cowboys number 1, probably Packers number 2, and then you got Texans, and then yeah, that's about it. Other than the Cardinals, if you want to go there. Yeah, cool. That is the video. It lasted longer than I thought it would, again. But hey, I'm here to talk if you're here to listen. So if you like this content, please like, subscribe, comment. Give me any feedback if there's something that I'm doing that you don't like. Give me some feedback if there's something that I do correct that you do like. Yeah, just keep tuning in. Sorry about missing that Thursday game again. Appreciate it. Have a good weekend. Good luck this Sunday.